Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to picture a merchant ship over 2,000 years ago. It's heavily weighed down, just battling this absolutely brutal storm just past the island of Crete. The 300 tons of cargo make it way too heavy and it sinks. History becomes legend, legend becomes myth, and for literally 2 millennia, the ship just sits there, forgotten at the bottom of the Mediterranean. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack the story of that exact shipwreck and the completely impossible secret it was hiding down there in the mud.
Now, to understand why this specific discovery absolutely broke everything we thought we knew about history, we have to look at this core question. Could a computer exist 1,400 years before the Renaissance? Fast forward from that ancient storm all the way to the year 1900. A sponge diver makes a dive and spots this bronze hand just sticking out of the mud. The crew manages to recover what turns out to be the largest collection of Greek artifacts ever found. But, while all the archaeologists back in Athens were totally obsessing over these beautiful marble statues and vases, this heavily corroded greenish lump of bronze just kind of sat there in the corner, completely unnoticed. Until it dried up, cracked open, and the shattered rock revealed something unthinkable. A large wheel, engraved letters, and interlocking smaller gears.
Section 1. An impossible ancient artifact. The 1900 discovery.
When the Greek archaeologist Valerios Steas first took a really close look at this shattered lump, his immediate realization sent absolute shockwaves through the scientific community. The intricate gears led to an insane conclusion. This was some kind of ancient clock. But wait, mechanical clocks didn't show up until 1,400 years later. It was perfectly described by experts as a mechanism over 1,000 years ahead of its time. People were just completely baffled. They deciphered ancient Greek letters, they found ancient Egyptian months hidden in the inscriptions, and even unusual words for the zodiac scale. Some scientists argued, well, it has to be an astrolabe, an ancient tool for measuring the stars. But here was the massive problem with that theory. Traditional astrolabes don't use gears. How on earth could an astrolabe possibly utilize interlocking mechanical bronze teeth?
Section 2. A century of code breaking. Unlocking the bronze.
So for decades, the research just kind of hit a brick wall, stalled out by 2 world wars. The machine actually survived at the bottom of some storeroom crates, almost forgotten all over again. But what unfolds next is a true scientific detective narrative. Let's walk through this timeline real quick, because the behind-the-scenes drama is honestly fascinating. In 1953, diving technology takes a massive leap forward, and Jacques Cousteau actually returns to the wreck. Thanks to newly developed scuba gear, he found the sunken ship's hull almost perfectly preserved, though, bummer, he couldn't find any new mechanism parts. Fast forward to the 1970s, a historian named Derek Price uses new X-ray tech to build the first actual model, but it was flawed. Get this, he literally had to change the number of gear teeth in his model just to make his math work. Later, researchers Michael Wright and Alan Bramley stepped in, flying to Athens to take 700 images using a cutting-edge technique called tomography. But they had a massive falling out. Bramley basically took the images and walked away. It wasn't until years later, on his deathbed after a cancer diagnosis, that Bramley finally confessed his desire for solo glory and dramatically handed those 700 3D scans back to Wright.
And that dramatic handover, that paved the way for the ultimate breakthrough. In the years that followed, a mathematician named Tony Freeth gathered a massive research project. They were dealing with just 82 original surviving fragments. But by running these pieces through incredibly advanced modern scanning, those 700 individual tomography slices suddenly revealed everything. Inscriptions hidden deep within the stone, literally obscured for 2,000 years, were suddenly readable in crystal clear detail. By 2021, Freeth's team managed to combine a whole century of evidence to finally put the puzzle together and definitively solve the world's oldest computer.
Section 3. How analog computers work. Gears as math. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it forces us to redefine the very word computer. We are all so used to touchscreens and lithium batteries that we kind of forget what computing actually means at its core.
Basically, a computer is simply any device that stores information, processes it, and solves math equations. That's it. On one side, we have digital computers, right? Like the smartphone sitting in your pocket. If you ask it to multiply 8 times 2, it translates those numbers into binary code. Ones and zeros, solves the math, and translates it back to you. But on the other side, we have analog computers. They do not use binary code, they use continuous physical motion. Think gears, pulleys, and physical ratios. Let's break down exactly how this works step by step. Say, to multiply 8 times 2. Step 1, you input energy by rotating a large gear that has exactly 16 teeth. Step 2, that energy transfers directly to an interlocking, smaller gear that has just 8 teeth.
Step 3, because of the ratio, every single time you turn that larger gear once, the smaller one is literally forced to turn twice. Mathematically speaking, the physical motion just multiplied your input by 2. It's exactly the elegant logic of a clock transforming seconds into minutes and minutes into hours. The ancient Greeks were actually using bronze gears as living, moving multiplication equations.
Section 4. A pocket-sized universe, simulating the cosmos.
So, if these gears were doing complex math, what exactly were they calculating? Well, the device originally sat inside a wooden box, about the size of a modern hardcover book, with a little handle on the side. When you turned that crank, you were operating a complete, working simulation of the cosmos. As you turned the handle, these nested rings and dials mapped out just an astonishing amount of data. You could pick any day, and the machine showed you exactly where the moon stood. It tracked the 19-year metactonic cycle, which, by the way, was the basis for ancient calendars. It tracked the sun and the 5 planets that were known at the time. It even had an eclipse predictor on the lower ring, and a smaller scale that meticulously tracked the 4-year cultural cycle of the Olympic Games.
But here is a truly fascinating twist. While it sounds like a pure, highly scientific tool for a dedicated astronomer, the evidence actually suggests something else entirely. It was most likely the ultimate ancient luxury toy, a very impressive, very expensive piece of tech to show off. The ancient Greeks heavily believed in astrology, the idea that the position of the stars at your birth directly influenced your life. Today, if you want to know if Mercury was in retrograde when you were born, you just, Google it. Back then, you needed to hire an astronomer. But if you were incredibly wealthy and owned this box, you could just crank the handle back to your birthday and check your horoscope yourself.
Section 5. The geocentric glitch, a beautifully flawed machine. The mechanism is undoubtedly a technological masterpiece, no question. But here is the ultimate ironic twist. It actually kind of sucked at accuracy. To understand why it was beautifully, foundationally flawed, we have to look at the geocentric model. See, the ancient Greeks didn't have telescopes. They just looked up at the sky, wrote down what they saw, and developed their theories. Because of this, they firmly believed the Earth sat directly at the dead center of the universe. They didn't have a heliocentric understanding, meaning they had no idea the sun was at the center. So, they essentially built the core logic of this supercomputer based on a completely incorrect scientific premise.
Because they firmly believed Earth was the center, they had to explain some really weird things happening up in the sky. If you stare at a planet like Mercury long enough from Earth, it appears to slow down, stop, and actually move backwards in a little loop before moving forward again. The Greeks called these loops epicycles, and they meticulously tracked this backwards retrograde movement. But thanks to Copernicus, we now know these loops are really just an optical illusion, completely caused by our own orbit around the sun.
So the crucial point is this: the engineers of the Antikythera Mechanism were literally forcing physical gears to replicate an optical illusion. Just think about how insanely difficult that is. Translating the geocentric model and these fake planetary loops into bronze required making the inside of the machine mind-bogglingly complex. You're adding incredible amounts of mechanical friction to simulate something that isn't actually happening in real physics. Because of all this force complexity and the compounding mechanical error, the machine was ultimately off by about one whole zodiac sign. Now, despite its inaccuracy, the sheer engineering required to build it is so unbelievable that for years, people claimed it had to be a literal time machine or maybe left behind by aliens. But the truth is much more grounded, and in a weird way, a lot more tragic. The Antikythera Mechanism wasn't a one-off anomaly. Actually, several ancient texts mention similar devices designed by the legendary mathematician Archimedes. These spheres that showed the motion of the sun, moon, and planets. So, why haven't we found them? Well, because bronze was incredibly valuable. The lost spheres of Archimedes, and likely many other ancient computers, were simply melted down to make basic bronze coins and weapons.
Which brings us right to this final, lingering thought. In a totally weird twist of fate, the only reason we know the ancient Greeks were master engineers capable of building working analog computers is because a merchant ship sank in a terrible storm 2,000 years ago. The ocean itself protected this one piece of bronze from being melted down into currency. It completely forces us to look at human history differently and ask, if the Antikythera Mechanism wasn't the first, what else is waiting for us at the bottom of the sea?